Just a quick video here to demonstrate what I keep saying. I've got a few comments during and probably after. See what you want, hear what you want, ignore what you want, scoff at what you want, laugh at what you want, do what you want. Isn't freedom great? Just don't say you weren't warned. If you remember my video, I believe it's called Tucker Carlson Quiet Part Aloud, where he's talking about the police state, what they'll do, what they won't do, what they'll enforce, what they won't enforce, whether they'll infringe, whether they won't infringe, and what's happening in our country now. Well, here's Dan Bongino saying the same thing. He's just not going far enough either.
So I've warned you repeatedly on this show over and over that sadly the constitutional republic is dying a very slow and painful death, and the police state is taking its place. Power always seeks a vacuum, right?
Absolutely correct, Mr. Bongino, except I would assert to you that this has been happening for a very long time, much longer than you or Tucker Carlson or anybody else has even been suggesting at. And where were you guys at when even those sheep on the right who keep screaming back the blue were screaming it and endorsing and condoning them being used as they've been being used for a while?
No show has sounded the alarm as loudly as this show about the pending destruction of the rule of law and the entrance of the police state right in front of your very eyes, knocking at our door right now.
And yet again, Mr. Bongino, I would agree with you, except they're not knocking at the door, they are literally kicking it in. Guns drawn, fingers on triggers, and ready to slaughter you if you dissent. They want your Second Amendment, they want your First Amendment, they want all of it. And guess who they're using to get it?
They are loving every second of this, ladies and gentlemen. They worship the police state. They always have. From the Mar-a-Lago raid to locking up their political enemies, they have salivated over this for years.
And yet again, I agree with Mr. Bongino, but let's take it a step further. How did the police get so emboldened? How did they get that delusion of heroism and grandeur and unaccountability? They got it from the many on the right that keep screaming back the blue with their heads in the sand. That's how they got to the point. And then when they got so big and they got so powerful and they got so unaccountable, now the tyranny comes in and now it can use them as the stormtroopers.
What's a police state? For those of you who may just be a little bit in doubt and say, I'm not sure, that may be a little hyperbolic. Are we really living in a police state? Well, what is it? Ask yourself. The police state is when you investigate a person in search of a crime.
Yeah, well, police have been doing this daily for a very long time. It's called phishing, and it became more and more popular the more government began stealing individual freedoms and making laws about such, which came from both the left and the right in Washington, D.C. Let's not lie here. And I'm not talking about investigating. That is a different concept altogether. Phishing, in my opinion, is a search for a crime when no reasonable suspicion exists to indicate there's a crime to search for, and is often based upon a malicious motive such as contempt of cop, or voicing dissent, or a dislike of a person or their beliefs. The more power the government wanted, the more laws it had to write. And the more laws they had to write, the more power they had to give to their stormtroopers known as police to enforce those laws. Logical, right? There's a saying that talks about this, that essentially states that you can tell the freedom of a nation and its people by the number of laws on the books, suggesting that the more laws there are, the less free the people are. I can't find that quote right now, but if you know where it is, feel free to direct me, as it is one I consider truth. Moving on.
Now, what does a constitutional republic look like? And a law-abiding society? You have rights. You have big R God-given rights. What happens is someone alleges a crime. Hey, I was mugged. What do the police do, or the FBI if it's a bank robbery, whatever it may be? They say, we're going to research this. We're going to go do an investigation, and we're going to try to find the person. Remember Beria, the infamous Soviet, who said, you show me the man, I'll find you the crime? The constitutional republic, we've managed to survive as long as we have the world's most prosperous democracy ever in the history of the cosmos because of faith in institutions. Don't assume that's a given. All of this stuff that we do, whether it's our belief in our Constitution and the rule of law and God-given rights enshrined by that piece of paper, that is just a piece of paper. Our Constitution only works because people believe in it.
Well, that's part of the reason why it worked. The other part is because people were willing to fight and die for it, not just talk about it, not just have a bunch of stupid meetings in Washington on TV so they can pat themselves on the back that they took a tough stand, and because people were willing to stand up. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's not going to be trusted, and it's not going to be enforced, and we are going to become enslaved.
Ladies and gentlemen, faith in our institutions are collapsing. You don't have to believe me, just look at the polls. Revered institutions like our military, the FBI, revered institutions. In the past, 50, 60 years ago, where people used to tune in to Walter Cronkite for the media thinking they were getting the truth. Now they know the media is part of the apparatus, and institutions' faith in them are absolutely collapsing.
And I submit to you, they are being grown, they are being weaponized, they are being indoctrinated, they are being brainwashed, and they are being twisted and perverted into weaponized tools against freedoms and liberty and against we the people daily. And I submit to you that this is occurring at every level of law enforcement, local, state, Federal Bureau of Politicization. All of them are being used against we the people and freedoms, period. That's why it's called a police state.
Folks, the country's bifurcating. The country's bifurcating into a tyrannical police state left that wants third world type law enforcement right here used to conquer your political enemies, and then us, the sane people, the rest of us.
Mr. Bongino is correct yet again, but he ignores or does not go far enough to cover the fact that the right has their hands in this as well. The left may be hating the police for all the wrong reasons. Propaganda, narratives of black people just being indiscriminately slaughtered on the streets by police, proven to be a load of horse crap, just like hands up, don't shoot, and all the other BS propaganda they cling to. So I keep saying the left hates the police for all the wrong and propagandist reasons. However, at least they're hating the police and pushing back. Meanwhile, you've got the right, the ones that shove their heads in the sand and ignore and pretend the issue isn't an issue. Not all of them. Not the overwhelming majority like on the left, but the ones on the right whom scream, "Pack the blue," until it happens to you, and screaming, "Police are heroes," and shoving their heads in the sand, ignoring the most basic historical and logical facts that the police are the stormtroopers and will be so and have been so for the tyranny. Whether the individual officers participate directly or not, they are enabling the downward spiral of the nation by enabling tyranny through participation in the profession, and I call those officers tyrants by extension, and tyrant or tyranny enablers. Then there's those that do participate directly in infringing upon your rights, and I call those tyrants and tyranny enablers as well.
You run the very real risk of becoming a target of these deep staters who will stop at nothing to make sure when you become a threat to them, that they make sure they take care of it.
Absolutely. And Mr. Bongino, let me ask you a question. Who are they going to use to infringe, to steal, to murder, to cheat, to kidnap, to imprison, to enforce tyranny? Who?
Using our law enforcement system.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. I think your mic's dying. Could you repeat that? Who are they going to use against us? And who are they using against us?
Using our law enforcement system.
Oh, thank you very much for that clarification, sir. Please continue.
These people on the left would like nothing more than any excuse to use against you to throw you in prison too. They want nothing more.
And yet again, good point by Mr. Bongino. However, again, he doesn't go far enough because there's many on the right that are figuratively standing around with their heads in the sand, and or those in Washington, D.C., like Ditch Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Blowhard Graham, and many that sell out your rights daily and are enabling, if not pushing, the same end, which is a crash into the same wall, no matter which car you're in and which direction it goes to get there. Which all leads me to some final thoughts, comments, and if you don't care to listen, you know where the stop button is, and if you dislike them, well, you know where the figurative YouTube door is. I honestly couldn't care if my thoughts and opinions are liked at this point. People, wake up. The name is in the frickin' concept. Police state. It's not political state. It's not unfair state. It's not slightly infringing state. It's not security guard state. It's called the police state, and for good reasons. It is the police and law enforcement, local, state, federal police that are the ones in history and today that are called upon to enforce tyranny daily, infringe on your rights daily, steal your property, steal your money, steal your freedom, steal your rights, steal your constitution, steal your nation, and in many cases, steal your very lives for the tyrannical government daily. How many times do you have to hear the words police state with the main word right there in the damn concept title before you get that? I'll give you this. I'll concede that there are some quote-unquote good, depending upon your definition, people that put on that uniform. But as I keep saying, once they put on that uniform, they are enabling, endorsing, condoning, supporting, and pushing tyranny for the tyrants that sign their paycheck and want them to do what they want them to do. Unfortunately, they don't care enough to do anything about it, not even the most basic actions, and instead hide their heads in the figurative sand and say, I won't enact tyranny personally, and ignorantly believe that their very presence in the gang of tyranny enforcers isn't somehow aiding and abetting and enabling tyranny and downfall of freedom, liberty, U.S. Constitution, nation, on, that our founders envisioned and conceived of, and many after them fought and died to ensure. Let me say this again. Maybe it will sink in. It's called police state. It's right there in the name, and Dan Bongino kind of gets it, but he turns around and still calls them heroes and enables their delusions and denials of what they have become, and he won't go far enough, just like Tucker Carlson, to say what the truth today is, and that is, if you are a police officer, you are enabling tyranny either directly or indirectly, either through action or inaction, either through endorsement or silence, either through participation in the tyranny or enabling the tyranny, with your person being another member of the Blue ISIS gang known as Police Today, and the tyranny enforcers known as Police Today, and what I call them today, and what I believe they are today, which is nothing more than a domestic, hostile, occupying force. When people like Dan Bongino, Tucker Carlson, and others are telling you what is happening, yet they refuse to extrapolate or logically consider the end result, the logical outcome and conclusion, and what must be the case with the law enforcement profession today, they are also in denial. But at least they are telling you enough that you can figure out what they aren't saying, but what is also a fact today. Here's a fact for you, or one that I consider a fact. You can't belong to a gang, and because you decide to sit at home while they are out burglarizing and terrorizing your town, then turn around and say, I'm not a part of the problem. Your very participation with said gang makes you just as culpable and just as responsible and just as guilty. You can't belong to a gang that is being used against your fellow citizens and neighbors, and because you say, I'm only going to be the getaway driver, turn around and claim innocence. If I were you, right or left, and don't get me wrong, from what I've seen and heard, there aren't any on the left whom do get this while they cheer on everyone's loss of freedoms and being enslaved, and many on the right are doing the same. But if you care about freedom, liberties, rights, and U.S. Constitution, then I'd be paying more attention, listening to those that are trying to tell you what to pay attention to, such as Dan Bongino, Tucker Carlson, and the like, even when they stop short of being completely honest with you and start preparing and fighting back against your own enslavement. I would assert to you that there is no way to reconcile or make sense a claim of support for those concepts such as freedom, liberty, Constitution, etc., while at the same time screaming back the blue and police are heroes, which ignores the history, a current state of the nation, the profession, the current state of that profession, what they do, who they do those actions for, and enables the delusion that got us here today, with police, state, growing, and being emboldened by ignorance daily. The facts, the history, and the truth is right in front of your eyes, and even occasionally directly near your ears when spoken of by even those not stating all of the facts for whatever motives they may have. Sometimes it isn't what they do say, but what they refuse to state, but is a logical conclusion based upon their own comments when they are making those statements that is the most important. One last time, the word is in the title. Police state. I don't claim to know everything, nor have all of the answers, but I sure as hell have and ask many questions, and I'm neither blind nor deaf. And those that blindly bootlick or blindly endorse anything, refusing to see any possibility of issues with such, nor accept that they are enabling what they turn around and then scream about wanting to fight against, are either indoctrinated sheep, or hypocrites at best, or liars at worst. Get it? Got it? Good. Looks like I'm all done here.
Ultimately, what they want is full power and control over every single person and their households.
And they'll use law enforcement to do it. And the police and the FBI and the courts.
You run the very real risk of becoming a target of these deep staters who will stop at nothing to make sure when you become a threat to them, that they make sure they take care of it. Using our law enforcement system.
And they'll use law enforcement to do it.
Who will stop at nothing using our law enforcement system.